Hey, this is Doc Eric. Welcome to my YouTube neighborhood, the channel where you get one mindset tip and one body set tip rolled into one video to take with you not only throughout today's video, but also in future as well. So today what we're going to be talking about is the concept of a movement screen. What is a movement screen and why I think they're beneficial for everybody to do. So let's go ahead and jump in. So movement screens are not only just determine the function for somebody who's in a rehabilitative state, but also it allows for performance, but it also gives you a marker of where you're at in terms of what your body's doing. So online at this point, so many people are working from home, so many people are shooting videos and content that there's likely someone who's done a movement screen for pretty much every single part of the body, whether it's a shoulder range of motion, a neck range of motion, a hip, a lower back, a knee, ankle, you name it. If it's a joint, somebody's probably designed and put out there some content so that you can kind of follow with at home as well. And I'll try to put a couple of links below so that you can see some of the recommendations that I think would be beneficial for you guys as well. So the purpose of a movement screen is to basically see what can the joint do relative to what we believe is to be a clinical acceptable range of motion, right? So if we're looking at an arm, the shoulder, for example, it is a ball and socket joint, so it has a very high degree of mobility, but it has a very high degree of instability as well, so it sacrifices mobility for stability. The hip joint, for example, is a very, very stable joint, and it has a great degree of range of motion, but not as great as the shoulder range of motion. So that's typically why we see more shoulder injuries than we do with hip injuries. If we look at something simple like an elbow, it's basically a hinge joint that opens and closes and opens and closes. We do have a pivoting component at the wrist, but if we're just looking at the elbow, it has a limited function, a limited range of motion. So why would you even care about getting a movement screen done at all? A movement screen is important because it allows you to see what the joint can actually do, or if you're noticing that there's pain at a particular range of motion in that joint. So if we look at the elbow joint and we look at it from a 0 to 180 degree arc, if you have pain in the first 10% or the last 10% of the range of motion, that's important because you may find yourself in a position where you have to use the tissue in a fully lengthened or a fully shortened state, and that's where you may be prone to injury. Most of us, for example, are pretty good on that in-between range, but it's that 10% roughly on either side where we can potentially run into problems or reoccurring problems that never seem to go away. So the purpose of a movement screen is to identify the limited weakness or the limited strength or lack of coordination in a particular range of motion, right? Once you've established that, then you can start to integrate a corrective exercise protocol or a strength protocol that's going to help you kind of shore up those areas. So if we're looking at that elbow example again, if you're short here on that 10% at the short motion and 10% at the lengthened position, if we can get these areas both strong and minimize that window, then you're going to have a better degree of success and a reduced capacity or a reduced chance of consistent re-injury because you've strengthened and you've addressed those tissues. Beyond that, it's a matter of maintaining your consistency with whatever exercise that your therapist has given you so that you can continue to maintain a pain-free range of motion as well as maintaining your strength as long as possible. Some of the exceptions to a range of motion are if you're working with somebody who has had any sort of surgery, or if you're working with somebody who is from the athletic population. So if we're looking at the example of a baseball player, somebody who consistently throws with, say, for example, their right arm, they're going to have a lot more external range of motion than the typical population. So from a clinical perspective, what we would say is, oh, this person's shoulder goes a lot further back than clinically is warranted, so we would typically address that as a pathology. So this is why when you take a good intake and you learn that the person may have been playing a sport for a long enough period of time, you can attribute that additional range of motion due to the sport itself and the length of time that the sport was played. If the individual has been playing that sport for a long period of time, still has that extended range of motion, but now they're starting to experience pain with it, then you can start to address the strength concerns to make them stronger in that extra arc in terms of that range of motion. Similarly, if somebody's had a surgery, you have to make allowances for that as well. So if someone has had a shoulder surgery where there's some sort of rotator cuff reconstruction, where pins or anchors may be in place, or if somebody has had a partial or full knee replacement, or a partial or full hip replacement, or some sort of surgery to their lower back where perhaps a fusion was warranted, you're going to notice that some of the structure, the foundation of the range of motion was sacrificed in terms of preserving a pain-free range of motion. So basically what that means is you're somebody who had a full range of motion. You utilize the tissues to a point where they started to become painful. A surgery was done to correct and support that range of motion, but now you're sacrificing strength or range of motion at the experience of reducing pain. So hopefully we answered what is a range of motion and how I think it's applicable for most people. Again, if you're someone who's curious about what the range of motion is relatively, there's a ton of YouTube videos, and I'll try to put a bunch of links down at the bottom here so that can help you out and at least give you a starting point, a jumping in point in terms of what's going on and how you can best help out your own body. And then from there you can reach out to an appropriate therapist so that they can help you out. And as always, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. I love getting new YouTube visitors to this channel. It helps me grow the channel, but also allows me to generate new and fresh content, ideas that you guys are recommending to me. All these videos, by the way, that I do are based upon the recommendations that are coming from you guys clinically, as well as through direct messaging. So I thank you guys for that as well. And always, until next time, stay healthy.